I get the pleasure to be in build sessions with MSPs just like you, building real things with AI. And the number one friction point, the number one blocker is I can't connect to all the systems. In fact, my vendor makes an MCP server or a connector or whatever they call it, yet it's read-only. Another one tried it and it limited them to 100 records. How are you going to search for all the tickets when you can only get to 100? If you're tired of vendor connectors and MCP servers holding your business back, check out the MSP Skills Repo. The link is below. It's got over 50 different MCP servers, skills, and connectors that you can use to connect your entire stack to the agentic AI of your choice. Now, why do you care? The reason is you can now go through and say, find all the unused licenses that I'm paying for that I shouldn't be. Would you like it to go through and prep across all your different tools for that QBR? That thing that took you hours to prepare for one client is now one sentence. So if you want to make sure you're getting the value out of AI, you've got to connect it to your real world business systems. And there is no better place than the MSP Skills Repo. Check it out on the link below. And if you have questions or if you just want to join, learn more, come to one of the build sessions. You'll see us putting it into action.
We don't have to be in the 0.01% of the adopters. We just need to figure out where we feel like is safe. Top decile, great. If you're the first to the 10% of MSPs who's leading and going there. And there's so much market and so much value that we can create for clients. The amount of value that we can deliver for clients that clients have been asking us for years that want to, that's now enabled through this, it's unbelievable.
Hey guys, Damien Stevens, host of MSP Mindset, founder and CEO of Servacity. Today, I'm blessed to be joined by Ryan Barton. And if you've ever wondered, what does the future of MSPs look like? This is the guy to answer it. He built an MSP and exited it. He built his own AI lab, which was then acquired by New Charter Technologies, where he's now the Chief Innovation Officer. Very few people has the team and resources and time to put into what does the future of AI and MSPs look like from a technology, business model, and from a culture perspective. If you want to know the future, don't miss out on our conversation today. Ryan, I want to dig right in. You said something that I think far few people are thinking about. Far few are they're wondering, but they don't know how to get their hands around, which is, what does the MSP of the future look like? I know you founded a lab to try to build that. You're at New Charter, which is one of the world's largest current MSPs. So you have a different lens than most. Where do we even start to unravel that question?
Yeah, let's maybe start with the way that I see that, and then we can also do the origin history of how we got there if you want to.
Yeah.
I think that if you look at MSP service, we're guaranteeing an outcome for our clients, right? We're delivering service to take complexity out of our clients' environments, and we take on that complexity and we deliver an outcome for them. However we bill for it, that's ultimately what we're doing. That service is delivered typically about 85 to 90% labor and 10 to 15% software. I'm one of the ones who thought that RMM 20 years ago was going to turn it to so much software. And my disappointment on the RMM path has been frequent and often about how much we can really use it to drive the software side of that. Obviously, RMM is important and has been for years, but it's still a very labor-intensive business. I think the fundamental question for me is there are now 3 categories, first of all, which is labor, models, and software. And how does the proportions of these change over time? And so, an MSP is a marriage between software from the MSP ecosystem and service models that work closely with that software to deliver the outcome. Mm-hmm. And so the question that I've been after is, how do the percentages of what's now 3 categories change, and what's the right relationship with them, and how do we accelerate our path towards the future where we're in a different fundamental dynamic between labor models and software?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. Let me start with why. Why does that matter to you?
That's a great question. I mean, the first answer that comes up is just because I care about people and I care about teams. I care about companies. I care about clients. I care that we do this well. I think to put more color on that, I got my first job in this space when I was 16. I was hired to help fix the computers, build the computers, install. I got no training. I messed up all over the place. I could thankfully grow a tiny bit of facial hair so I didn't look 12. But it's always been my saving grace to not looking too crazy young. And then I started a company at 20 that was an MSP really by accident, just because I kept on taking care of people's computers and then they'd call me for their work computers. And then it just grew, I think is a not atypical story in this, right? If you have some gifting with people and with technology, you kind of end up getting some clients. And then if you're lucky, you can steward that into a business. And, that was long enough ago that I've seen multiple trends come and go through the MSP space. And so if we take RMM as the first one, right? Like service agreements, the whole structure is fundamentally different after RMM versus before RMM. I mean, the amount of remote work versus dispatching the truck with the trunk full of tools, which is very much where I started. And then I saw that over time, these trends would come, but they were pretty predictable where you would see them go enterprise, mid-market, SMB. And I realized that if you got ahead of that, you could actually learn from what was happening in enterprise and mid-market and anticipate what was coming and go there before the rest of the ecosystem. So for instance, I built an information security practice 10 years ago now, which was before it was popular in the MSP space, before any of the managed SIEM, outsourced SOC, any of that had happened, because I saw what was coming and our more sophisticated clients were starting to work with InfoSec firms that were dedicated practices. And it was like, oh, how do we scale this down? How do we make that available? That's been really, really helpful for the MSP that I founded and grew through those years on its way to being a 100+ person company that's a very sophisticated security first MSP, because we were able to get ahead of it and build and learn all the lessons and all the training and the service model iteration to truly be a high security MSP. That was a lot of work, but we got ahead of it. And that paid dividends. So seeing that with cloud, if we rewound from security, early Office 365 partner back in the day and get everybody off of small business servers, thank God, onto Office 365 back then. And it was like, look, if you go early and you look at where the proven wisdom is, you get all the gains and you avoid risk. I happen to hate risk. Even as an entrepreneur, it's all about how do we understand where our assumptions are, where our uncertainties are, and build experimentation to take that risk out. And so I've been tracking AI and it was following the same trajectory, right? Enterprise, mid-market. It was very much the game of really large, really expensive labs until November of 22, when OpenAI really changed the game, right? And then April of 23 was when all the light bulbs went off for me, because I just saw the trajectory when GPT-4 came out, and it was like, whoa, this is seismic, and it's released to everybody. So there isn't a path that's proven. This is now on all of us to experiment. And at that point, I just was filled with the sense of the opportunity and the risk in this space and for the people that I care about and the organizations that I care about. And it was like, okay, what's the most responsible and rigorous response that I can have?
So is that what led you to founding the lab?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So to me, it became clear that this isn't just like the advent of these ever expanding LLMs and the AI race and the crazy world that we are all in is representing a new category in the world, right? Like it's not just training, it's not just software, it's not just human. Like this is actually a fundamentally different thing that doesn't match our intuition models about how it should go. And so it became clear to me that that was going to impact like every layer of abstraction in the business. So if we just break it down for a second, you take an MSP at the base level, you have a team member who has certain behavior, and they're wrapped around processes, and they're trained in processes, and around that they're supported by tools, and those tools are backed by systems, and above that you have strategy, and that whole thing is inside of a business model that's inside of an ecosystem, right? And you kind of have all these layers of abstraction, and in the MSP space we have answers for every one of those that's years long. And I looked at that and just thought, well, it's not obvious to me how this is going to impact every single one of those layers. And you just say, oh, your techs are going to do more. Well, what does that do to your tools and your systems? Well, your systems are going to change. Well, what does that do to my strategy? Well, that's going to change. Well, what does that do to my business model? How will that change the market? And so I wanted to have an answer for myself. And I was fortunate to have a lot of wonderful connections and people in my life. And one of them was a good friend of mine who had been a great DevOps leader in multiple startups. And I saw he had a core team that he worked with that's like ML architect, developer, DevOps, really great team, worked together for 20 years. They were in between projects. And I was like, oh, this is great. I'd retired from my MSP. They were in between projects. I said, let's bring this together. Let's embed deeply. And let's try a startup model that's questioning all these assumptions, and let's just learn and let's spend some time learning without the pressure of immediately like, what's the product that we're launching, so that we can build a prediction model. Like that to me was the most important thing, was could we begin to predict where this was going to go? And then could we actually track those predictions and see, are we tracking that accurately? And if so, then if I can see further ahead where the industry is going, I can then make bets and build things in advance of that that's going to position us the best and help the most amount of people.
So it's a pretty unusual journey. Tell me, I want to stop you there for a second. Tell me about retiring from the MSP. What did that mean?
Yeah, I spent 20 years, the team that I love and continue to love, building a really great business, very proud of, has won dozens of awards and has incredible retention and internal ownership. And I'm not the 1% improvement every quarter or every month guy or every week, right? Like that steady growth, that's really what Mainstay, that's the name of the MSP, Mainstay Technologies. That's really what it needed, was like good stewardship. And I had the combination of a senior leadership team that was really clearly ready, and my own angst of like getting near 40 and being like, I've done this for 20 years. I've got more I want to do. I want to go explore things. And it just was a really wonderful thing that gave me a couple years to experiment and reinvent and do. I built a nonprofit with a cognitive scientist whose teachings had really impacted me, and I wanted to give back and help those teachings to be stewarded better. His name's Dr. John Vervaeke. I got to build a nonprofit, and he's one of the world's leading authorities on intelligence transformation and wisdom cultivation. And he's very involved in AI because he's an intelligence researcher. And so I was actually working with him in a nonprofit that I founded with him when everything hit in 2023. And so I had all these wonderful connections and this really rich ecosystem, that then one of the things that came out of this was this little startup that ended up getting acquired by New Charter and brought in internally, because fundamentally what I was fascinated by was the change in business model and strategy and behavior and all of that. And if I went to market with tooling, it was clear I'd be in a race with others bringing tooling and trying to convince leaders to make behavioral and service model changes, which was going to limit the pace of change. Right. And so the minute I went into production software, the software is now facing different inertia, and I'm now trying to convince leaders to change. And that to me was not the path to unlock what I really wanted to unlock. And Peter Melby is the CEO. You've had him as a guest on this. I've known him for 10 years because we're both building very culture first MSPs. And I found him through an article that he wrote, and I was like, we need to talk. And so he was like, we're building this really unusual, very cool organization here. Why don't you bring that internally and turn it into the innovation center? And that's what we've been doing for the last 18 months.
So now you are the Chief Innovation Officer.
Yes, sir.
That's a wild ride. I believe Socratic consulting along the way. Is that right?
Yeah, Socratic counseling. It's a very different thing from a very deep passion of mine about the inner journey as opposed to the outer business journey.
Yeah, so much more to dig in there. I want to. So you have, MSP experience, you have this lab, but I want to kind of keep on that thread for a moment. So you didn't have the pressure to produce a product immediately, but what did the lab do? What does it become? What does it do?
It's a great question. So first thing that we did was get in and look at what can we build that would keep change cost low. Like one of the things that I've learned that anyone in the MSP space will immediately resonate with, I'm sure, is that one of our most precious resources in MSP is change cost, like is the bandwidth for change. And so we have to be very thoughtful and careful about it. And I know that because I've made every mistake you can, from reorging to make things look great on a whiteboard to promoting people before they're ready to like, let's just do this new thing, guys. Isn't exciting? Like, I'm so happy we're doing a new thing and no one else is, right? And so what we built was a handful of tools and then saw what really took. And So you can imagine what is obvious now, and there's now market catch up, which is actually part of what has given us good confirmation on our prediction lens. Like one of the first things we built was a pod in ConnectWise backed by a database. It was the time that was just built on a vector database that was focused on pulling all the tickets and documentation together, synopsizing it, providing relevant information for the text, and then seeing how does that work and how helpful is that. And then another was how do we spin RPA and help RPA to be adopted more rapidly, build more automations with AI? How do we begin to connect our data and run analysis on it and inform management of what's interesting of trends and analysis with AI? So, in 23, 24, those tools weren't available. And in building them, we were able to learn a lot of what worked and what didn't in architecture, and then just keep going towards bigger and bigger problems. And those, like some of those tools are in use in production at New Charter today, and they have gone through multiple iterations, and every tech's got a pod that has tremendous, like our goal is that they never have to look at a documentation system. And so it's pulling relevant information, but it's all grounded in real resolution notes of real tickets and real documentation, snippets, and then real information, obviously, about the client. And then they can pass all of that into a context-rich chat with whatever frontier model that they're using. And so now there are market options available for that, right? You can do something very similar. We might argue that our architecture is better. They might argue theirs is. And then you get into the cost of owning your own software versus not. But a couple of years ago, that gave us a nice advantage and a nice thing of looking. And that was one of the first things that we built.
So did you go to market before you were acquired, or was
no, we embedded at Mainstay because it still had all those relationships and influence with that organization. And so we did essentially the forward deployed engineer model, if you want to put a fun term on it. And then, but also in the testing, the conversations, the experimentation, and then, enabling chat, training in the organization and seeing what took hold. And then we're able to bring that experimentation into New Charter. So when New Charter acquired us, we had data models and layers, we had multiple different tools, and we had strategy and theory and things that were being baked. And they were able to bring us in. Our strategy has been get immediate ROI and put things in front of every team member in the organization immediately. And essentially, we run a few different categories of strategy. One is every employee should have access to frontier models and great training and great resources and ability to build and connect to all their data with it. Another is we should have the best tools that the industry offers. I spend a lot of time talking to CEOs and leaders in software around the system. And they're often very happy because we have a highly technical team in the innovation center that loves to experiment with stuff. So we're like, can you please do this? Like, where are we with this MCP server? And they're like, oh my gosh, no one even seems to know what that is. Like, thank you. And so we get to experiment. We get to work with them, and we want the best of breed software. We want everyone to build software, and then we build our own tools and sort of a variety of levels of ROI and requirements of change around that. And so some of those get rolled out everywhere. Some of them get rolled out in more discreetly, and some of them are, fueling brand new stuff. And then we inform all of that into what we're actually offering for clients for services and recommendations. So we can be, I think you're a big eat your own dog food, you got to transform yourself. You got to go there first. And I very much resonate with that.
So where are you on the journey of dog fooding versus offering anything externally? And then what is when I say that, right, what's your role in that? Because obviously it's a big organization and you can offer lots of things that have nothing to do with the product.
Yeah, let me ground to just share a little bit about the context of New Charter. So,
please.
New Charter is a platform that's acquired 35 organizations. And there's sort of two traditional models in acquiring the MSP space. There's the roll-up that integrates all of those. So you have one help desk and one stack, and they gain control because they have a very centralized leadership team, but they lose a lot of team and client retention because the clients didn't buy that model fundamentally, and things may be better, but they don't feel better to the techs who are hired into one model and now have to change and don't have influence. And so there's a lot of turnover. And so those organizations often move mid-market and they kind of work through the turnover and go upstream. Is a second kind of platform that buys and doesn't touch them. It's just like, hey, long-term hold. Well, then you don't get the entrepreneurial fire and creativity in all these organizations long-term. And in the world of AI, I see that as a real threat because we have to make change and we have to lead the industry. And these trends continue to roll through and we've got to be ahead of our clients. And so what attracted us to New Charter is that it's this third way, which is a corporate team and a very intentional layer of integration while leaving service models discrete in the different operating companies, like anyone who's been acquired. And so, HR and finance and some of those systems align and integrate, and some of those teams align. And then there are obviously different leadership, and there's different oversight at the new charter level for these operating companies, but the leaders stay. And then we can centralize tools and we can bring together, and it's really the best of breed. I mean, new charter is very, very choosy about who fits, and growing culture first organizations are the ones that end up getting acquired by new charter. And so for us, it had the ideal balance between some centralization where we could use it to distribute tools, to be on a common platform, and some differentiation where we could run experiments in different operating companies with different teams, and then sort of seed that. And so back to your question of where are we in this, the last year and a half has been seeding tools and models and conversations and working with the really creative folks who are all across. As an interlude, I'll just say, my title makes sense because we need an innovation center in this time. But I always tell the team, we are all innovators. Every one of the 1,500 employees at New Charter, we only have an innovation center because of the uniqueness of this time and the ability to go ahead of the software industry, build our own tools, learn things, learn lessons and strategy. That's helpful to all of the employees and the clients, not because we're trying to consolidate innovation, right? Innovation's going to happen everywhere. And so, we've taken those lessons and then we've been able to build and hire some teams. So for instance, there's a development team that's been around for a long time in New Charter who's really retooled and done an amazing job leading their clients to robust software with AI, and of AI into the client's products, so think a more mature SDLC using that robust software development approach, using AI and around AI. And so we've been successful at New Charter doing that for a while. And then I chose to, based on all these lessons, actually hire a leader from the outside and start a new team called AI Enablement. It's very obvious, I think, for anyone in the MSP space that the wave of complexity that has moved through these years, right? Security. Remember when cloud came out, it was all our bills are going to go down. Clients no, because there's new complexity to manage. It happened to be in the area of data and information security. And then as that's become more normal, where's the next wave? Well, the complexity is moving into AI and business process. And so there's this very obvious, great, MSPs need to move with the complexity. What's really challenging, as I'm sure you appreciate with all of your experience, is that what makes someone a great MSP is that they run the IT department. Yeah. Not because they run business process and behavioral training for clients. I think we tend to struggle with that enough internally. So it's a very different DNA in my experience when you get into organizational business process, staff training, motivation. And what I see is some founders, especially of smaller MSPs, they get it. They're that person. They can reinvent their team. They can go there. More scaled ones tend to struggle. And I think anyone who's been around a long time tends to struggle because it's not what MSPs do. And so one of the real advantages with New Charter is we can offer all of our operating companies now access to central teams that we start or build with separate DNA that's focused around that. And that's one of the things the AI enablement team does. So they come in and they train clients on how to use AI, how to save 5 hours a week for every one of their leaders. How do you do the change rollout? They'll walk with them on an ongoing basis with recurring revenue, or they'll just come in and kickstart it with clients. And that's been growing really rapidly for us.
Yeah, so obviously you built a lab. I kind of knew or expected that we would talk and get into how you're enabling technology with frontier models. And that's interesting. But what you just said, if I heard that, is to me what the more interesting question is, how do we deal with this from a cultural perspective, right? And not only internally, which is huge, but with clients and not just the owner or whoever our contact is, but how's that going to affect their team? Are they going to embrace this, or are they going to fear it internally at clients? All of those sort of things. So, what is your take on that? What have you seen?
Yeah, I mean that's a really big question for my take. Let me respond. What's coming up for me is that I'm more and more seeing things through a lens that I want to propose to you. And I really appreciate your feedback on this. And I'm curious how this maps for your experience. I think we're in a moment with AI in general where it's really reached the people who are creatives and who have a sort of meta skill of thinking about how do I work and how do I improve. And some of us, I think, if on an entrepreneurial journey, you're always thinking like, are my goals right? How do I get there faster? Am I using the right levers? How do I increase my leverage? Like there's a sense of looking at my work and thinking, how do I improve it? And my experience is that individual professionals, whether they're internally or at clients, who have that skill and have honed that, are adopting AI quickly and gaining really rapid gains. But that skill is not an easy skill to teach, and it's not necessarily available to everybody just from the way of thinking, and that there's a really big majority really of staff inside organizations like New Charter and MSPs and within our clients who are more like, show me the process, like tell me what it is the thing to do. And very few of us are ready in a holistic way to actually teach them exactly what to do. We're more like, no, co-intelligence, you got to think with this and give it all your data and then you can ask it and we don't know. And it's a jagged frontier and it's growing and all that's true. And I think certain people get that and are really going there. And a lot go, that's overwhelming. Like, tell me when I'm supposed to do and what I'm supposed to do. And it's enabling and empowering both groups that requires our attention as leaders. What do you think of that model of sort of dividing roughly? Obviously, it's a spectrum and there's many variables, but thinking about those two different groups.
Yeah, I think I don't have the right term, but I have experienced that because I've always been working on the meta skill, as you said, right? Working on the skills to improve the skills. And I know enough to know that is not common or not the majority. And I've seen that with a lot of, for example, right now with agentic AI, most people are still chatting with AI and not really employing agentic AI.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if you're a really large or small company, whether you're MSP or not. The other thing that shocked me internally is typically our most technical, most senior people, they adopted cloud, they adopted cybersecurity first. Yes. But that's not what's happening. The people that kind of use your terminology, think meta or adopt meta skills, they're adopting this. They're not always the most technical. Sometimes the most technical people are actually the ones that are the least likely to adopt it, feels like right now.
Yeah.
And so that has very much been my experience. And there's probably a better way, a nicer way to say this, but I've said this multiple times, like as a C-level, if you're not getting your hands dirty with this, if you're not doing some things,
100%,
then you're going to miss out. And because it informs, like you said earlier, strategy.
Yes.
And so I think that if you don't, like, yes, you can have amazing people like you and others that, do all the heavy lifting and really do the innovating, but you don't really outsource innovation. And if you understand where the business, if the future's going and strategy, then you don't delegate or outsource. And I've had so many people say, I'm just going to hand this to my CTO or to my VP. And I just think that, that reminds me of the people that used to have their emails typed by their secretary,
I like that.
And I was like, that you're missing the transition here. Like, we're all going to be using a keyboard directly.
Yes. I think that's a really apt analogy and extremely good advice that I echo. And the data is very clear that an organization doesn't change until the leaders do. Mm-hmm. And it can be there in pockets and people can have different wins, but the organization doesn't get unlocked. And I would really define an unlocked organization as the organization gets better when the models get better, that the organization is faster, more effective every time the models have a step change. And that doesn't happen unless the leaders really go first. And as a leader, I need an informed gut about this. Like I need an intuition, a sense of what's here. But it does just go back to the weirdness of what we're playing with AI, that this is a technology, but it's not a technology, and it's an intelligence, but it's not an intelligence. It's this like category in between. And so it's like, as a CEO or as an executive, you would never delegate people completely to someone or strategy. It's like, this is not just like technology in the background. This is something novel. We all have to go there. And unfortunately, a lot of technologists either don't have, maybe we can break down this meta skill into design thinking being one component,
Mm-hmm.
and then motivation to rework and an openness to really redoing work as the other. Because one of the things that we find is that, take a help desk technician. A lot of them started the way I did. I built gaming computers and had to upgrade RAM on our family's 486 to play the latest King's Quest, right? Like that's where I cut my teeth.
Yeah.
And then if you do that, you're like hands-on tinkerer, and then you start solving issues and you plug network gear in. And it's a very tactile experience. Even if you're working through an RMM, like you're remoting in and you're feeling your way through that computer. And it's like, I solved it, and you get that satisfaction and the client's happy and thanking you. There's kind of a loop there of like issue, deep dive, hands dirty. I get the satisfaction. The client's happy. I move on to the next one. What are we saying now? We're saying, oh, AI's already triaged this and prepped all of this. Here's what we think needs to happen. Could you click these buttons if you agree and run an automation, and then make sure, and you're now a risk analyst on this, make sure that it runs right, deal with anything if it doesn't, and then move on to the next ticket and do it a lot faster. That's a completely different motivation cycle. That's a completely different job. And technologists, a lot of them are not leading the way towards that future because it is so different. And so that's tough. It's a tough dynamic. It's a tough dynamic for those people because those are the jobs that are changing, and not everybody likes the change, but we can't control this. Like you and I did not start this race. No single individual or group of individuals can stop it. We are in a different environment and we have to adapt. And I try to encourage our team to really think that way, that this is an opportunity to adapt, but we don't control the environment that we're operating in.
Right. That's a good point about the control, especially. I want to challenge one thing you said, nuance-wise, because this is my belief, and I want to see if it's yours or because you said, you define that you're an unlocked organization when you improve, when the models get better. But I found a lot of people that are just chatting with AI. They're so hyped about the newest model, and that's all they talk about, and it makes their chat better, and that's great. But I would nuance it and say, yes, you should be going with the grain, not anti-grain, so everything gets better. But I challenge that because there's so much you can do now to codify your processes and your domain expertise into different parts of the harness or skills, or just without getting the technical details. There's so much you can do that you don't need to wait on, the next model. And yes, when the next model comes out, that will be something that makes you better. But I also find just as many people going, I just have to wait, or having access to the frontier model is my differentiator.
Thank you. I would not want to clumsily articulate that point in a way that was conveyed as you just said there. Yeah. I think for me, AI is a resource that's an ever-growing, plentiful resource. Mm-hmm. And that has to be brought in and change really every facet of a business. Yeah. And as that resource becomes more powerful and more plentiful, every facet of that organization should be growing. And so maybe I can amend the definition to say the organization should be growing in capacity and speed and precision and efficiency and revenue and all of those things. And that should be happening across as many and wide a domain as possible. And we don't need the models to get any better for all of this change. Like if the models stop, which there are days where I feel like praying for the models to just stop getting better so that we could all metabolize some of what has happened in these last few years, because what has been released now will completely change the business world over the next 10 years if they don't get better. If they keep getting better in the exponential curves that they are, it gets really weird and hard to predict.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's well said, right? Because I do have the belief that if no model came out, we've got years and years of work to metabolize the opportunity and the potential. There's not just technical work. There's a lot of cultural and process.
Yes. Oh my goodness. The hard work is, it's easy to be wowed by a chat experience. The hard work is to recognize the intelligence underneath that. And how chat's actually not the most remarkable interface for this. It's just the one that we were all given in the beginning. Yeah. And to then say, wow, how do we take this resource and then actually do all the real world change to create value for people? Like if we're not doing something that impacts a person, a tree is falling in a forest is making a sound. Like this has to show up in human flourishing for it to be worth anything. We have to actually do the hard work of change and of taking this pattern prediction machine that we have and actually then bringing it into all the little nuanced patterns that we have in our different domain expertise and actually getting it to provide value there. That is years and years and years and years worth of work. And it's long and slow, even when you push at it with all of your might. Like it's hard to do that change, and it's going to take a long time. And we don't need the models to get any better or more capable for that to be seismic.
Right. So we didn't start it. We can't stop it. And
right.
It's like you said, it's hard for my human linear brain to grasp the exponential increase that continues to happen. Not only model, but harness and other layers. And so I think a lot of us got into this business because we loved the change, right? The pace of it. Things were not boring, but I would say we're past the ability to absorb and comprehend the change generally as a single individual. So how do you get your arms around, great, we got this ability, we're going to go do these things. And then, that's a year project or whatever it is. And 12 times during that period, the environment I operated in changed.
Yeah. I think I want to underline that I don't think I've met anyone who doesn't feel behind in this space. Like, I don't think you can be around. It doesn't matter. Like, as you've heard, this has been a very big focus of my life for the last 3 years. And I've had a significant team of like the most remarkable professionals who are so going ahead and are like towering intellects whose full-time job, like that's the advantage at New Charters. We literally can pay for the most brilliant people that I've ever worked with to focus on this as their full-time job. And we feel behind. Like anyone, anywhere feels behind in this.
Yeah. I won't forget that Karpathy, who was one of the
Pardon me, say it again.
Karpathy, who's one of the founders of OpenAI and now at Anthropic, said he feels behind, and if you're at a founding lab, frontier lab, and you feel behind, then, where are we going to feel?
That's right. So we have to learn to temper our anxiety and the existential crises that can happen along the way, and talking with others and sharing and connecting and listening to great podcasts, all a great way to level set that. Beyond that, I think that aligning oneself and one's organization with the trend as much and as deeply as possible. We don't have to be in the 0.01% of the adopters. We just need to figure out where we feel like is safe. Like I top decile, great. If you're the first to the 10% of MSPs who's leading and going there. And there's so much market and so much value that we can create for clients. I mean, the amount of value that we can deliver for clients that clients have been asking us for years that want to, that's now enabled through this. It's unbelievable. It's just, we've got to do that in line with the trend and go fast and go hard. And I think recognize that no one person can do this. And so when we have change at this scale, individual cognition really struggles to keep up for anyone. And I think is not actually, no one person has the cognition level to do this well. It's about distributed cognition, which is teams. That's what the entire human species has been able to do, is unlock our ability to connect with others. And then as a culture, as groups, as teams, unlock and solve problems that no one could solve as a single individual. Who builds a skyscraper in New York City, right? It's a distributed cognition that's capable of bringing that staggering feat of engineering genius to life. So it's the same here. It's like aligning with great teams, aligning with great conversations. And then I believe that it's wise to do experiments that have different ROIs at different timeframes. So you want to do things that have immediate ROI. Like, let's just teach everybody some use cases and get them prompting, and let's get some tools in, and then let's invest in tooling that might take 6 months or so. And then let's build some things that could take a year, but let's do it in ways that as the models get better, we assume that project is going to get better. And then we reevaluate at times. And I'll say that that's been helpful. I mean, we sort of reevaluated every week in the beginning and then every month. And now it's like every quarter where we're like, all right, how do we put the chips of investment into different buckets, and what are we doing here? And the world has gotten a little more predictable in that way. But it takes a team and it takes effort.
Yeah. What is your what's your take on the view of agents as coworkers?
Internally or with clients? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, wherever you want to start with that. It's. I think it's an interesting analogy, right? But I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, I think that it's very obvious that there's tremendous capability within an agent. However you want to define that, and I think that's one of the challenges in conversations like this, is that we all might be defining agent a little bit differently. But if you think of it at its minimum as like a prompt that is scheduled or triggered that can then run and do something and then put that somewhere, right? Does that work as a minimum definition of an agent for you?
Yeah, that's a great minimum definition.
So if we just think of that can scale to different sizes, like of course it's wonderful to have meetings prepped, to have AI models prep you for a podcast, hypothetically speaking, that can go and do all of these things and deliver it. And we can then schedule that to be proactive before meetings. That's one of the most obvious, easy things for anyone who's in meetings a lot, especially people they don't know, is go burn some tokens doing a lot of research and prepare me before my meeting easily. And then I think if we can unlock staff to use agents and to build agents, that's really wonderful. There's an obvious security concern that's challenging that we frankly wrestle with a lot at New Charter because of our compliances and security requirements of how do we do this? And you could literally very easily build an agent that said, scrape all of my documentation and of passwords and firewalls and post it to a public website. Like, and the agent would just do it. Now, like, how do you secure that? It's an AI risk management program that's required. It's not an easy one-stop answer to that. And so, but I think that there's also, I want to go back to something I said earlier about the models, the layers of abstraction within a business, where if you bring in agents as coworkers, I see that very much at the process and tools level, which is a little bit further down. And we may be needing to do change at higher levels of like team design and business model design, that just coming in and saying, ooh, we can automate and take care of this thing for you and move it from, and do this automatically. That's great. Let's get started with that. But let's make sure we're also asking the big question of what outcomes are we wanting to drive. And thanks to this technology, are we actually doing it in the best way? Because there's lots of ways to use AI to do that, and agents happen to be one of them. And I'm interested in making sure business leaders are asking questions at the right level and thinking about how their market and their business model may change, which sometimes business leaders do that and they come back as, no, my business model and market isn't going to change much. Others come back and it's going to change a lot. And let's do agents, but let's make sure we're also asking questions at a higher level.
Yeah. Yeah. Not for the sake of buzzword bingo or just anything like that. But the reason I ask is I feel like there's a pretty big cultural impact, because when we're doing automation type things, that's one thing of like every time a meeting's done or in prep of a meeting, like you said, prepare these things. And then when you move into the point where you're giving that feedback like you would a coworker, and then it can improve, then it is something that I think it's not it's not a perfect analogy, but to me it does start to, because it's like, well, how does that impact the design of our org and where we put our people? And it's not, my personal take is it's not less people. It's giving you the ability to work within your gifts and maybe taking away some of the drudgery or toil. And, the fascinating part to me is that's different for each of us.
Yeah.
I have people that do accounting. I don't know why. I would not like to do that, but they really enjoy that.
Yes.
And so those gifts are different, and what that looks like, for each person is different.
Yeah. AI has the capability of helping us to be more human, more aligned with our gifting, doing more, creating more in the world. Like, I ultimately believe that what holds up capitalism is this incredible concept of value creation, that I'm not a woodworker, but someone could cut down a tree and take wood that's worth almost nothing and carve a statue that someone pays $1,000 for. They haven't taken that $1,000 for anything. Like, you sell it, that person is $1,000 piece of art and you have $1,000 cash. We just made the world richer by doing this, by using our skill to create value. AI needs to be brought into that. And those are decisions that we make that I think are about what's the value that we can unlock as a team, both bottom up for employees doing this themselves and experimenting and using in their jobs, and top down as an organization, and how we constellate bottom up and top down experimentation to unlock more value. And value has to be for humans. It has to be for the clients. It has to be for the organization. It has to be for the leaders. It has to be for the employees. Otherwise, like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, exactly right. You have an interesting lens, a very interesting lens, being at one of the largest MSPs, founding the lab, having built an MSP, Socratic counseling. You have a lot of lenses there. What is your take on the MSP of the future so far? I know that's evolving, and you may have a new answer next week, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I love that question. I'd love to hear your response and thoughts to this. I'll just boil it down to two motions that we talk about a lot at New Charter. I think MSP of the future is delivering IT service, like service of an IT department, in a much more software and model driven way with labor. Like, it is still a very people integrated service where our clients are trusting us because every dollar of revenue flows through IT systems. They want to know who their team is. People have to be responsible for that. That's you right. Can robo financial invest all you want, but at some point you want a financial planner who has certifications who tells you, you're wise, Damien, this is a good investment. Like, keep your money where it is. Don't panic when the stock market goes down, right? Like, we need humans, that human trust, that human, the on-site, the pieces, like, there's so much. And I think that IT department is going to be more software and model driven with labor as well, that will allow us to do more in the IT department, far more security, far better vulnerability remediation. How many MSPs are perfect on their Microsoft 365 security scores, right? Like, nobody. It's so hard. We can solve all of that now. We can actually deliver the value we want to. How many are giving immediate response time 24/7 with chat that's, informed by all of the context and really great? Like, that's all possible now and is being birthed in this industry. And the MSP of the future is delivering the IT experience that we've always wanted to give our clients, and doing that with the best people, the best models, and the best software. That's one side of it. The other side of it is the MSP of the future is guiding clients through the complexity of how AI impacts their business, and is stewarding this technology, this intelligence, and helping. That domain is wide open. Our clients need it. If we don't do it, what are we going to ask the CPAs to do it, or the line of business specific software people? Like, we need all of us to go. Like, I'm not saying not to have CPAs help guide it, but MSPs have the opportunity. That's where the complexity is moving. And so the MSP of the future is crushing both. So, imagine being a client and it's like, look, we're going to deliver the IT experience that you want, and it's automated where you want it and human where you want it. And it's adjustable to you, and it works the way you want it to, and it's predictable cost. And then we're going to come in and help your organization and deliver the service of a CIO who can navigate all of this for you and do that well, and actually do that in a programmatic way. It's winning in those two areas that will, I think, establish the next generation of the MSP.
Yeah, I think the latter area is the part we grew up because we like to work on the tech, and we did the tech, and we'll gravitate towards that naturally. But the thing is, we're often struggling with the pace of change and the complexity, and forgetting the technology for a moment, the cultural impact, the process, the design thinking, all of the other things. And sometimes we're missing out on, like, we're better informed than our clients in this area. How do we lead them through that, which is, completely new territory.
It is.
And I think maybe within that, I'd love your thoughts, Ryan, is what I'm most excited about for our industry is, our biggest hope was to be the CIO, VCIO, and, have trust. If we were running this well, we really wanted to be trusted and really kind of have a seat at the board. Yeah. But for the most part, it was just the lower the cost of IT, the better in most cases. We weren't usually driving innovation or driving EBITDA or revenue. And I fear for the industry that if we don't, this will become SaaS. And my point about SaaS is we mostly missed out on SaaS. They just went and bought it. They didn't have any governance or security or any discussions with us. They just bought and implemented. And but if we do this well, we not only have the help that we can give them in things like governance and security and things that we're ostensibly good at now, but the future we've just never had the lever to say, how can we help you rethink your business in a way that makes your team happier, that allows them to leverage their gifts, maybe to go home earlier, to increase EBITDA or profit, right? And my IT budget is probably as low as I can make it, and lower would be better. And then, but if you're helping keep my team longer, drive EBITDA, profit,
Yes.
revenue, okay, well, as much as I can hand you is probably the answer to that.
Yeah. I think that's really well said. And just to reflect it back to you, I agree that the MSP of the past has mostly operated on removing risk from the organizations, taking away cybersecurity threat, taking away downtime, taking away inefficiency and slowdowns more than bringing value. Like, it is valuable to do that, but it really has been aligned.
It is valuable, but the thing is, it was mostly things that we hoped didn't happen.
Right.
And that was always hard to quantify, right?
Yeah, if all of your applications and hardware just worked and there weren't any cybersecurity threats, you wouldn't really need an MSP. You would just plug it all in, everything would work, and you'd have what you need. Now, there's still complexity to navigate of how you get software connect, but even most MSPs are not doing data connections and connecting different systems together. Like, it's very much at hardware and software fixing, proactive maintenance level. And I agree that's going to move more and more towards a commodity. It will be needed for a long, long time. I mean, like, I think we're going to need people trusted MSP service forever. It's a critical service for clients. That 40-person law firm still wants to know who's the brand that I trust, the team that I trust. This is still a critical function. I got to have somebody work across multiple vendors. Great. But that's becoming more commoditized. And I think we're going to see that happen. And it doesn't mean costs plummet, because there's more and more value that we can add through that. And our clients are concerned about outcomes. And we, frankly, as an industry, aren't that great at delivering the outcomes they're paying for us now anyway. And most of us have big backlogs of tickets and things we want to do. And we'd love to get to better policies. And like, we have so much value to generate that it's less about like cost collapse. And it's more about just how do you align to be the really great company that your client can set it and forget it. And I think we need large organizations like New Charter to go first. We need the software ecosystem to evolve and have much more progressive offerings. And then MSPs have to reinvent around that, or, join organizations like New Charter or find their way through that side of things. But if we can align towards the value generation, the value creation, how do we actually get into your business? I agree. That's the unlimited opportunity. It's also the one that we don't have as much history in doing. And it's kind of like the leaders might, because they did that internally. Yeah. How do you then turn that? But the teams aren't necessarily, which is why at New Charter, a lot of times we're doing this with net new teams and leaders that we can bring in or promote into that, so that we can separate those and do those together, but not trying to do it in the same teams. I think it's difficult. It is a different skill.
Yeah. It's easy to say that. And I am excited about the opportunity, because we really didn't have the lever to ever really show up and do that before. Right. And now we have the pace of change, the complexity.
Yes.
Hopefully, as things that are essentially driving them to us. Yes. And then we have the opportunities to do things we couldn't before.
Every client has wanted a technologist to sit with them and guide them through their technology always anyway. It's now the cost of doing that has come down. The ability to enable staff with great context and guidance with AI to do that is improved. And the client attention, the heat is bigger than it ever has been on this. And we can get ROI a lot faster. It's not like, well, if you implement an ERP, hopefully in 36 months, you're going to see ROI, but half the time it blows up and is a catastrophe, right? Like, that's not our top recommendation anymore. It's like, oh, we can do that. And ERP has its place, and we love it. We have a great thriving ERP practice at New Charter for the clients where it's right in the Dynamics world, but that's not the answer for every single business. And I think that's what is next to unlock for us, we're looking at how do we unlock holistic strategy and a very clear journey for our clients across all of this. But, the SMBs move slower than mid-market enterprise. A lot of them are scared by AI still. They're not sure. We're going to do a lot of education because it's still very early for most of our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think this will do to you mentioned earlier, like managed services is very different than block of hours, break fix, there's big change in business model. What's your take on what may happen from a business model perspective?
Yeah, it's great. What I want to say is I have my theory, and then what I've worked to build is the team that builds MVPs, minimum viable products, to test these assumptions. There's an interesting way of using startup methodology to look at the assumptions that are already proven in an organization versus a startup is normally looking at brand new open space and they have to prove all the assumptions of, I think I can provide value here. Now it's about, we've always done it this way. How can we do it differently? And so what I'll say is, I'll have a lot more in data informed opinion on that in 6 and 9 months. I think that we will see an outcome-based pricing that's similar to flat cost, but is very clearly like this is driven by the model where we can predict it based on software models and team, and it's all very predictable. And then here's the cost edges that might be on-site visits or some of those other things, and that we'll be moving more and more towards a kind of consumption. Here's your clear usage. Here's your clear. That's still how a lot of flat cost per user is. I don't think we need to change a lot from a per user base flat cost, but pricing on outcomes where we have very clear of what we can control and then different pricing for what we can't. I think that theory will still hold.
Yeah. It's really early to know that, right? But it's interesting if you can drive outcomes in a very different way.
Yep.
What's your biggest fear?
Like in my life or in this space?
Well, maybe in this space, but I guess you can answer that however you'd like, right?
I'll answer both together because that's what comes up for me. I think that I grew up with a feeling that the world is not stable. And, I grew up in a home that had the theology of like the rapture could happen at any moment. If you know what that means, it's sort of like there's an uncertainty and it's like you could be standing damned or saved at any moment. And like there's no controlling of some of these dynamics, this kind of end times world that was very much a part of my growing up world. And that left me with this feeling of like, doom can happen at any moment. And I that goes a little in the Socratic counseling journey of like how to heal and grow and bring that into healthy ways. Where that informs me in a healthy way is that I'm risk paranoid. And so I do lots of startup type building because I think that's actually the best way to mitigate risk is to try lots of experiments, assuming that I don't know and assuming that the world's going to be different than I anticipate. And I want to be successful in lots of futures. So the fear that I have is that the future is somehow different than the various ones that I've modeled and that this thing's going to change faster in some way that I don't get my arms around and I can't care for the people around me well. Like I feel my responsibility to shepherd the 150,000 users who rely on New Charter every day, the 1,500 employees who are trusting us with their careers, the people at Mainstay, the people in my life, the people who are listening to this, who may weigh something that I say with a modicum of respect. I want to offer all of that the best that I can. And I think that the AI space is just weird enough to trigger some of my deep, like, can I predict and how fast is this going to go? And there's enough uncertainty that I always stay a little on edge. And that's a great competitive advantage. But, I ultimately fear that I'm wrong about how fast the models will go. I have I think research-backed arguments about why we won't just get to AGI that just takes over everything in the next couple of years. And I don't think recursive self-improving on the model side is going to unlock what the headlines sort of claim, because we need feedback loops, and like you need feedback loops in the real world, and you can't just get those at the speed of light. Like if you want to invent a drug that cures cancer, you have to at some point have a lab and have mice and actually run the whole loop to get feedback. That takes years. That doesn't just happen in a lab at the speed of light. And so I think there's very clear foundational principles about intelligence that means we're not going to just wake up in this world with conscious AGIs that are doing all these crazy things. I think it's going to go differently. I fear that it could go that way. And all my strategizing could be for not. I don't think it's going to, but you asked about fears.
Yeah, that's wonderful, right? When the frontier model founders say something similar, right? The percentages, it's pretty interesting. Um, what keeps you getting up early? What are you passionate about right now?
Yeah. I am passionate about seeing lives improved by whatever we're doing through work. Like, to me, that's just how I have a very simple success measure, which is that I want to die looking back on my life, feeling like that was a life that was worthy of the suffering that I endured and the mistakes that I made to the people all around. And I know of no way to measure that better than love, like the ultimate answer of being love. Like, I want a funeral with lots of crying and happy people who celebrated that I brought more love into the world and I received love and I was known and I knew people, and that my work is part of that. I don't want work to be something over here that I get money from. Like, all of this to me is generative towards my particular definition of success. And so I have a lot of passion around that. I'm very committed to the value generation for all of these people that I'm connected to, my own life, my family. We have amazing opportunities. Like, what a moment in history we live in for anyone who wants to be creative and take some risks. Like, you can do unimaginable things. You can build entire software platforms. You can disrupt industries. You can take an idea and actually get tremendous feedback on it immediately and then go do something in the real world. So I have a lot of passion for that. And I also ultimately consider myself a creative at my core, and we're getting to build lots of cool stuff and experiment and try things and do things. And I'm doing that in an organization that's on a maturity curve where New Charter is getting better rapidly every month. Like, it's only a 6-year-old organization at the New Charter level. Like, obviously different operating companies are 20 and 30 and 40 years old. But like, at the New Charter level, there's so much that we're maturing, and I'm seeing the organization get better and better every month. That's really motivating to me. And I'm getting to create things and lead the environmental team that we have for the first time and help with different initiatives to help making careers better and build training programs and like creating stuff that I get passionate about. And then I also love diving into complexity. And like, we're in a world where there's new complexity you get to have for breakfast. And so getting to absorb that complexity, turn that into strategy, build stuff, do it with people I care about in a way that generates value that I believe is good for the world. There's my recipe.
I love that. I love that you're here sharing it with others, and that you are seen. Is there any ask? Is there anything you're like, hey, for anybody listening, I have an ask? That would
Where am I bullshitting through all of this? Like, please, if you have disconfirming data, look me up on LinkedIn, email me at New Charter Tech. It's first initial, last name, not hard to figure out. Right. Like, if you've got other data that you say something that I'm doing doesn't make sense to you, doesn't feel right. Like, we have to do this all together. And, at New Charter, it's very much a like, how do we help everyone to be successful? This is a huge market. Nobody has even 1% of the market share. It's not like we need to be in some competitive elbows out world. We are incentivized to care for our employees, care for our clients, and care for the system, the ecosystem. And so I think it's really about that. If there's been anything of value, and then of things that you see that you think you can help me to see better, please, we got to do this together.
I love that. Love it. So you actually kind of answered the next one, which is if you're open to people connecting.
Yes, of course.
What is the best way?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is great. And then if somebody's really trying, I would prefer if you're trying to sell something, please don't email me. But if it's something that's a genuine connection, email's great.
Okay, great. Make sure to take Ryan up on that incredible offer he just gave you. Ryan, I love this conversation. I've learned a lot. Thank you for being on MSP Mindset today.
Thank you. This was a joy.